Meet Ross Gillis. Ross is a good friend of mine that I've known for, I guess, 30 plus years now, from Tucson, Arizona. A military veteran of the Army. I'm excited to hear about everything that you did there, because I don't think we've ever really talked about it. I don't know if I didn't want to drudge up, whatever happened there. I know that sometimes for some guys that could be a little bit sensitive, but also former corrections officer for Arizona Department of Corrections. And now he's the old guy in the office at the elementary school that we used to look at and think, like, you didn't want to go near these people because they're old and they smell like mothballs. And so now you're that guy. It's awesome.
I'm that guy.
But Ross, thank you so much for taking the time to hang out and do this with me. This was important for a bunch of reasons that we'll get into, but I just can't thank you enough, man.
No, it's good to be here.
Yeah. So let's take me back, Philly style.
Philly style. We're good.
Philly style. Take me
like
back to the beginning. How did the whole Ross Gillis experience begin?
All of it began. Well, I was actually born in Mount Holly, New Jersey. So my Lankenau Hospital, and that wasn't where I ended up living, though. I guess it was just where my parents were at the time. And so my dad lived in, my parents lived in Medford Lakes, New Jersey. So it's it's right across the Walt Whitman Bridge from Philadelphia, and little tucked in the woods there. And it was good place for for the young me to just kind of enjoy. It was a smaller town, and I had a whole bunch of woodsmen around me, and there was a summer camp Akanikin. It was right down the road. In fact, I could walk through the woods at the end of my street there, and it was kind of a dead end there, and walk about a half, maybe quarter mile into the woods straight, and then you'd come upon a dirt road, and that was the driveway that led into the camp. And I spent a couple of years there as a youth. My parents divorced when I was about between the 6 or 7 years old, I want to say, right around there.
No kidding.
And and I went to live with my dad. My dad was a really upstanding guy. There's this country song, I can't think of who does it offhand, but one of the lyrics goes, he was the man he didn't have to be. And that's always been one of those things that's been real important. From all my formative years, it's always been him. My mom wasn't really involved in my life, and I struggled with some relationships with women and men over the years, because of it. Didn't really have that, not to get all psycho babble on you there, but
no, absolutely, that's
that was just one of those side effects of that. So we kind of moved around a bit. 1980, went to Lynchburg, Virginia. Lived there for about 3 years. 1983, my dad's job changed again. I went to military school at that point. I went to Carson Long Military Academy. It's in New Bloomfield, Pennsylvania. Sadly, it's now closed. January of 2019 is when they locked the gates because of enrollment. It's too bad, because it's been open since like 1836 or something like that. I forget what it is.
Right.
But it's okay. I'll hang it on the wall right there. I have a junior school department academic certificate right there that
cool.
Gives me a graduation one. So at least I have that. But so my dad lived in Nashua, New Hampshire between 83 and 85. And, he was in a relationship. That relationship fell apart. 1985, we packed our Ford van and headed west. And his parents, Dorothy and Ross B. Gillis, lived out here in Tucson and have for decades. They were RVers. And got a job out here. I started Santa Rita High School in 1985. And I met my future wife there as well. Her and I were in choir together, Amy Rexroth, and she was one of those girls that were just a little different. Whenever I would ask a girl out and they would say no, I'd be like, okay, see ya. And that was it. But she was the one I chased. Like most of the time I would never chase a girl like that.
Yes,
but,
you
she was
did.
something different. And
I remember it well.
So I, broke her down, and there we went. And but I'll always credit her for really single-handedly pulling my fat out of the fire, because I was on the road to ruin when it came to I was just a punk. I really was. I had long hair for a while, and then I shaved it all off, and I was just on the road to nowhere, man. And teenage angst, who knows what the deal was, but it's funny. I did a bulk of my career as an officer in prison, but it would have been very easy for me to be on the other side of that.
Sure.
And without her, we're not for her. And you know, so right out of high school, we you know, got married, had our son, and that probably was the turning point for me when it came to get my life right. You
Yeah.
know, like, you know, when it's just you and your girl, you know, you just do your things together. When you have like someone else that's depending on you, like, you know, like a kid,
Right.
your mindset changes. You know, children change people; they just do. And you know, for this particular case, he was everything because I wanted him to be not what I was. That was a big thing for me, and you know, and that really made it to where Amy and I worked at our marriage. You know, as with everything, there's always times you just want to call it.
Right.
But you know, we knew that that wouldn't be fair to him, and I think that that led to my decision to do the military, because when he was born as well, you know, I knew I had to do something to, you know, support him. And I mean, the military was always my choice, but now it was more pertinent, you know, and more important. So,
So did you kind of know, like at a young age, you kind of knew you were going to join the service in some capacity? You're going to do something.
Yep. Yeah, because when you come from a 2-generation military family, you don't really you have a choice, but you don't. You know what I mean? They expect you to do it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And when you don't, that's when they would be like, well, you know, you should really think about it. You know, they'd give you that whole rigmarole. But, you know, they didn't care which one I picked, just as long as I picked one. And so, you know, I did that, and that gave, you know, Amy and Robbie the benefits and me a job and a career that I wanted, you know, allowed us to move around a little bit and, you know, have some fun with that. But,
and some ups and downs along the way, right?
Of course. Oh yeah.
A lot of ups though. So I do want to go back to that time where when you and I met in school, Santa Rita High School, go Eagles,
yes.
Eagle Pride. If they don't close that school also. But you and I met in choir. So Dr. John Davis was our choir director. He was a phenomenal human being. He was amazing.
Absolutely.
And got together this little ensemble. There was, I don't know, 8 or 9 of us, I think.
I think no more
Something
than
like
a dozen.
Yeah.
I don't think he ever had more than 12.
And I was the youngster of the group. I was the, I don't know, I want to say the golden child in some ways, because I don't think anybody had ever done that before, right? Just jumped into ensemble as a freshman, sophomore. So that was exciting. But I got to meet you and the gang, the whole crew that we just hung out with like nonstop for the next 2 years, which was incredible. But tell me a little bit about how that piece came about, because music still is a big part of your life. And we'll touch on that in a second, but I definitely want to go back to when was it that music started to kind of influence you? Because when we met, I will never forget this. You had this, it was like a Frankenstein 13-piece drum set that dude, I thought you were like the coolest guy on the planet. I'm like, how do you have all this stuff, dude? This is awesome. Let's start a band. Which was a horrible idea, but we'll talk about that in a second. But when was that moment? Like, how did you go from like, okay, growing up in a military family and going through all the stuff and moving around? How did music play a role? What did that look like?
Well, you know, it's funny. I actually don't recall the starting point of what made me join choir. Like, I never looked at myself as a singer. I never liked choir guys or choir people. It just was never really crossed my mind to do that. You know, I'm a drummer. That's my musical love. That's my art that I pursue. But what made me want to sing, I don't know. I honestly can't pinpoint that. I just know that one day I just found myself doing it. And but apparently Dr. Davis found something in me that, you know, I think I did maybe a semester in 6th period beginning choir, and then he was like, you need to come to advanced, man. Go down to the counselor, get your schedule changed, and, you know, 3rd period is it. I said, okay.
Wow.
So I just kind of stuck with it, maybe because I was admired and I was flattered and I just wanted to follow that, and he thinks I'm great, so I'll just go ahead and do it. Sure. Who knows what? I honestly couldn't tell you. But I just know I stuck with it, and he asked me to be in this ensemble group. I had a pretty good tenor voice at the time, and you did. And it worked out. And
you're my hero, man.
Where you know, you and myself and, Aaron Flick and Dr. Davis doing a barbershop quartet. I mean, you can't make that stuff up, man. You just can't do it.
Cool stuff.
And it was our little touring group, and I've known some people that I've talked to in choir from years ago that were kind of pissed off that they weren't selected for that, or
no kidding,
that he weren't even considered. But I'm like, that wasn't my call. I mean, Dr. Davis would ask people to be in it, and he would have to recognize, as he would say, I recognize, I don't recruit. So that was kind of his little thing there, and I really like that. So I think that's where it started. The drumming was just more like a therapy for me. I could bash things with sticks, and that's never really changed. But but
was that like a childhood thing though? Did you look at big bands and also I'm interested to find out like who some of your favorites are. I already know the answer, but I'm excited for the rest of the group to kind of hear, some of your influences. But was there a time, even just like as a kid, that you thought, oh my gosh, that's it, I want to be a rock star and a drummer?
Yep. 1981 or 82 probably. I was 11 years old, 11 or 12, and my sister used to work for WMMR in Philadelphia. And years ago, back in the 80s, when they played records at radio stations, she would give me radio station like records that they were going to toss.
Wow.
And the record jacket had a big hole punched in the corner, and that was, that they couldn't sell them.
Promo only. That's
yep.
Absolutely
promotional
right.
only stickers on them, absolutely. And one of the records was Alive 2 by Kiss. And it was a big double album, double live album. And in that set was the song God of Thunder. Well, the live version of it, Peter Criss does a drum solo in the middle of that song. And I remember just being smitten hearing that, like just the way he did it. I can look back on it now. I'm thinking, oh, it's nothing that big, but 11-year-old me was like, wow, man.
Because the truth is, their music was not like super advanced. Like their stuff was so elementary in a lot of ways, but they did it so well, and they were such great showmen that you couldn't help but take notice. Yeah,
absolutely. And I remember seeing him, on TV and seeing some concert footage and his drum riser like 25, 30 feet in the air. And
that's awesome.
All these pyrotechnics and all that going off. And I think at that point I was bit by the ability and just the whole motion of it. And I just knew I had to do that. And so, I mean, I used to make drums from coffee cans and,
Did you really?
coffee cans. Oh yeah.
You were that kid?
Chopsticks as drumsticks, and and
buckets and Tupperware and stuff.
Yep, I'd hold concert in my little basement room, down there, and so that's really where the drumming started.
Yeah.
And from then on, it just never stopped.
That's awesome. So as we got to know each other, we had this crazy idea. I mean, this isn't all about just going back and talking about the stories and stuff, but we did have the crazy idea of starting a band. What was the name? What was the name of the band you were in high school?
Exposure.
Exposure.
What
did that first album cover photo look like?
Oh, okay. So think Red Hot Chili Peppers,
right?
But instead of socks, we had our instruments in front. Me holding the cymbal and Aaron with his bass, and you with the keyboard, and Mike Hudson with the guitar.
That's funny, man.
I really wish that picture was still around somewhere.
It's got to be somewhere. Somebody's probably going to have it. It's going to surface. It's absolutely going to surface.
Well, one of us just needs to run for office, and someone will find it.
I got to be honest, you and Amy. I mean, I'm so thankful to you guys. You have done such an amazing job, man, of keeping track of some of that old stuff, some of the old memorabilia, all the old concerts that we did and shows and music theater and all that stuff, man. You've come up with some stuff over the years that just blows me away. So
it's one of those box of videotapes, and give them to a guy that can do the transfer and put them on CD. So it's
absolutely
pretty much forever at this point, which is the whole point. And from Little Mary Sunshine to Lucky Hudson, and being in the talent show and, playing that where, we're getting booed off the stage. I mean, that's gold. You can't relive that now, man. Just, it doesn't work.
So I'm going to change gears like so hard, and this is probably not the right way to do it.
No, do it,
man. You went through so many different stages, right? You went through that whole period of high school where And it's awkward, man. I mean, you know, I'm the first to admit, like, I was not the coolest kid, especially in elementary school and growing up, like getting picked on and stuff like that, right? Yeah. So I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't figure out where I fit. Choir, actually meeting you guys and getting involved in choir was really where I went, oh, wow, okay, cool. Mm-hmm. This is stuff that I know I wanted to do when I was a kid, and oh my gosh, it's amazing. So, yeah. But everything else around it, you know, as you know, similar to your story, that I was going through some tough stuff in high school. In fact, the time that we all kind of started getting to know each other, and you know this, I mean, it's not a secret, but you know, dad attempting suicide and parents getting divorced, and but you went through some of that stuff so young, especially with the divorce piece. So so you've had these, like, you know, these massive swings in just life experience, and then going from immediately from high school to ta-da, you're a dad, and here's now you're a family man. Surprise. And then military career, and then Department of Corrections, and now, you know, kind of settling in a little bit in the later stages in life. But what were some of the times that you remember were just like the tough stuff that you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know how you're supposed to navigate this. What the hell is going on?
Well, I think a lot of you know, it's funny because a lot of people would think that having a child at 19 would be like a be all end all. And for me, it was, Amy and I have actually had this discussion where we've thought back on ourselves and been like, how did we do it? Like, how did two 19-year-old kids, you know, have a newborn and, you know, a military career and, you know, driving and doing all this kind of stuff and make it all work. And I think that was, it's not really a mystery that I look back on it. At the time it was, like, we just are like, wow, we were really good, you know, together. And I think that was a big strength, you know, for each other. But, two things, for me, I know are one of them is, I was rooted in the gospel of the Lord. You know, I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and you know, being your Mormon,
what? No, I'm just
right. And that, you know, that has always been a rock for me, because I was raised Catholic. I was a altar boy, and I was smitten by the whole, you know, pomp and circumstance, you know, the church. And then you know, when I met Amy, and I just knew that what I was doing was right as far as that conversion. And then a big thing for me, though, when I was little, I think right around the time the divorce happened, I'd say maybe a year later, the television show Star Trek was huge for me, because it was kind of an escape for that. I had a Mego bridge play set, and I used to, you know, with the little figures, and I used to mimic what was going on, you know, on the TV. And
did you really?
Star Trek was in syndication at the time. This was, you know,
of course,
80, whatever it was, so mid 70s, and so you could see it all the time, and so it gave me that escape. And that it was like a coping mechanism, really, because it allowed me to go somewhere where
no man had gone before.
Yeah, ready to go. Hey, all right.
Hey, and, I watched a couple episodes,
and that stuck with me to help me through hard times, really all the way until I'd say January, really, of this year. You know, not that I abandoned it, but I just didn't take it as seriously or use it as a mechanism like I did for all those years.
Right.
And I just kind of, you know, toned back the fandom a lot, and, you know, still have all the knowledge and, you know, all of that, but I just don't really take it as seriously. But I'd say, so, you know, religion and Star Trek, which some people mix together, it's really got me through a lot of those times that I just really wasn't doing well.